each section. And so that's kind of what we're planning on doing. One other thing, Tyrena, if you can record, please start doing so. We are going to record this for other people that aren't able to come if weren't able to be here today. So hopefully that'll work. So our objective today, we want to explain important context for statewide assessment activities. We want to offer a broad overview of programs and supports offered by the NDE Statewide Assessment Office. We want to examine an overview of DAC responsibilities, and then review program resources and context accessible by DAC. So we want everybody to have access to know where to find resources. There's no way that we could cover all the details today, and so we want you to know who to contact and where to find resources, which is a big part of what we want to do. I thought I'd start out with a little bit of just the philosophy of how we do things and how we make decisions and those types of things. We very much believe that we're here to serve students, educators in the districts of the state of Nebraska. Oftentimes those decisions we make are based on those. Actually, they're always based on those things, and making sure we serve all of you. Make laws and policies. So obviously we're not the ones making laws and high-level policies in the assessment office, but we want to make those laws and policies be the most beneficial and the least disruptive as possible. Most of us here were educators. We believe in the mission of education, and we really want to make everything run as best we can for you. We want to offer resources and support that assist districts develop and maintain a balanced assessment system. So the State Assessment Office, we really can't make a balanced assessment system, but what we can do is offer you support so that you can do that work. And so we'll talk about those as well. And then, of course, we want to fulfill the mission and vision of the State Board of Education and NDE, because that is our mandate as well. Some of the parameters, though, before I mentioned making decisions, right? So these are some of the things that go into our decision-making process. So what is best for all students? And that is oftentimes difficult, right? So making decisions for all students doesn't always take individual students into account. We try to as best we can, but we're making policies and decisions for the entire state. And so we're really looking at this holistic piece. Oftentimes, you are thinking about individual students when you're thinking about the decisions we make, and we totally understand and appreciate and want that. We want you to be thinking about those individual students, but it's hard to make every policy decision we make, every decision guideline we make. It's really tough because we're not thinking about an individual student. We're thinking about all students and trying to make the best decisions for all students. So important to think about that. Fairness and equity for students, educators, and districts. So a lot of the decisions we make around security, around standardization of the test, is around fairness. And we're thinking about equity for students and educators and districts as well. So we're trying to make those best decisions as well. Technical quality for our assessments. So our assessments have to have a certain technical quality. They have to meet certain standards and expectations that have been set forth by the testing community, the measurement community. And so we're trying to make sure that all of our tests meet those technical qualities. Otherwise, the results are very useful unless we meet those minimal technical qualities for our assessments. Of course, we always have to be thinking about federal and state statute and guidance, including purposes described in laws. So what is the purpose of a statewide assessment program, and what are the rules and regs that are put forth by state and federal law that we have to follow? And so I think it makes sense, and a lot of people don't really look at this, but I thought I'm just going to put it in front of you. Back in about 2009, when the statewide assessment program was put into place by law and we replaced the STAR system, The law put forth in 79.60.03 the purpose of a statewide assessment program, and the reason I put these in front of you is because they were defined as the purpose of the statewide assessment program. If there was a different purpose, we would have a different test, right? And I'm not going to read these to you, but they only mention students once. They don't mention teachers at all. They don't mention growth. They're really about comparison of schools and looking at how we're doing on standards and those types of things. They're really meant for a summative test to be a high-level examination of, are we doing a good job or not? Now, since this time, I would argue that we have tried to, because of the assessment tenet in AQuest, because of mandates from the state board and the commissioner, from mandates and requests from districts and teachers to do more. And so we added the vertical scales this year to try to get at growth. We added the adaptive test to try to meet students where they are and serve students better. But it's always, I think, important to understand the context of it is a statewide summative test. And it's meant for very specific things. And oftentimes you have better data from other assessments which to inform curriculum and instruction. This is a good overall piece, and it could be looked at for trends and those types of things, but it really is not, nor was it ever designed to be something that informed instruction and curriculum in a way that educators probably want, and that we need assessments that do those things. And I think that there are other tools to do those things, and I think that's important to think about. So statewide assessment context, I want to, and now that I'm in a different room than everybody else, and I'll probably try to go back there here in a minute, but so this is our website and our state context. So I just want to introduce everybody, and if they're still on the screen, they can wave to you here in a second. Many of them are going to be talking to you as we go through this, but this is our contact page on the statewide assessment. For general inquiries, here is our statewide assessment email. If you don't know who the question should go to, this is a great place to send it. Tyrena does a great job of sending those out to who needs them. And this is our general phone number as well. And so you can call that number anytime, and Tyrena or whoever will direct you to the right person. Of course, there I am. There is my email. Also, Terry O is our NAPE coordinator. Terry's going to be talking to you later. She runs the NAPE program. She does a great job. Rhonda True here, she's going to be talking to you later about the skills program. She's our enhanced assessment grant, which is what the skills grant is. She'll be talking about those details in a minute. Iris Owens is actually an ACT employee, but we're really glad that she's in our office and that she can help all of you and all of us with ACT questions. She not only has a lot of information about that, but if she doesn't have the answer, she can go get it for you. Maggie Sis is new to our department as well, and Maggie takes care of a lot of the data pieces. And then Tyrena Webster, who's our admin assistant. Currently, we have two positions that are open. We'll be looking for an assistant director here soon, and another admin assistant. And then I'd like to point out that below this are all the contact numbers for the customer service. So we have NWA and TestWiz Certica information here. There's information on ACT and who to call there for ACT online prep and pre-ACT. You could also direct those initial questions to Iris, and she'll let you know if you need to contact any of them. Then we also have Data Recognition Corporation and their information for the alternate assessment. And then, of course, the help desk at NDE for advisor old NSSRS questions as well. We'll come back to the website here soon. So just to kind of let you know who you should contact for general questions that you might have. This isn't an exhaustive list, but it should give you some idea of who those those questions should go to first. So obviously policy level questions, how to use results, security breaches, and accessibility questions should come to me. Iris, ACT, anything ACT should go to Iris. Also questions about the ACT online prep, the AOP, and pre-ACT questions should go to Iris as well. Questions about data questions, data corrections, anything around data and getting the right data into the system, the right data out of the system and reporting those types of things is all about Maggie. She's going to be doing a lot of those pieces. Terry O, all Nape questions should go to Terry, and the skills grant should go to Rhonda. Also, Tyrena is a great resource in our office about the website, where to find something on the website, and the timeline pieces. Any vendor customer services, you should direct those to any questions about technology or how to use their technology. Most of the time, you're going to have a better result in many cases if you direct those to the vendor customer service lines, especially technology installations and those types of things. Oftentimes, we can't help you on those things because it's their technology and workarounds, things, and how to make those work are probably best directed to them. Couple other people that we want to make sure that you're aware of that work in conjunction with us. Sharon Heater is the SPED liaison to assessment. Her information is there. She can answer accessibility questions for students with IEPs for NSCAS General and Alternate. And then just in questions about NSCAS Alternate in general, she would be a good source as well. Of course, I can answer those questions as well. Terry Schuster, who is going to be joining us here, I believe, later as well. She is the Title III coordinator, and she does all the work around the ELL assessments, the ELPA 21. She can answer questions about accessibility for EL students for NSCAS General and Alternate, and also any questions about the ELPA 21 questions should be directed to her. Lane Carr is the Director of Accountability and AQuest at the department. Our office used to be the Office of Statewide Assessment and Accountability. We broke that off, and accountability is now in school improvement, and now Lane Carr is the director. So really accountability and AQuest questions should be directed towards Lane. Any questions about school and district classification and the EBA, the evidence-based analysis, all of those things should be directed to Lane. He has much better information than we do in the assessment office now. So I want to spend a little bit of time going back to the website. I think the website has been redesigned here recently to try to make things easy for you to find, but I think that it makes sense for us just to walk through some of these pieces and show you where some of them are. So this is the statewide assessment homepage. You can you can see up here at the top, we're going to put updates there for you. This is nothing will appear here that we don't basically send to you though. So any updates here are basically for others than DACs, because for DACs, we've sent you an email with that information. So that's there. Obviously the dates are here for everybody. And so that you can see the testing dates that are easy to find and everything, but this also includes additional test dates or additional dates, and we'll show you that here in a second. Any new information that we have to post is often posted right on the front page. We also have a lot of links here for you so that you can get to the general assessment, alternate assessment, ACT, and ELPA 21 very easily. Get to these additional supports here. And then we also try to put links that are We also put links that you are probably common for you to want to go to. Here's the NEP, here's AQuest Accountability Advisor, those types of things. We try to put those right at the bottom of the page so that you can find what you're looking for very easily. If everybody could mute yourselves if you're not speaking, that would be great. We have some feedback back over the line. Okay, thank you. So over here, we already talked about the contact us page. This has all of our contact information, very easily accessible for you and the vendors there. We also have the important assessment dates here for you as well. So we have, you can go through each one of these and you can see that there are dates listed out. We try to put the big dates there for everybody, any deadlines there. The other thing, we put those out there so you can see them, but we're going to remind you of any deadlines. We're going to let you know if something's coming up, if you need to take care of something. We're going to let you know. We're not going to expect you just to come here and find out all of those things. This is here for your, so you can plan things out, so you can look to the future and those types of pieces. But we don't expect you necessarily to check this on a daily basis, a monthly basis. We're going to let you know when things are coming up for you. District assessment contact page. So this gives you some different information here. All of these PowerPoints that we're doing today, we're going to put up on here. Also, there's key message about NSCAS, some new DAC checklist information, and also some other resources are going to be put here. Like I said, the PowerPoints from today, we're going to post here as well. Then we have each, I should say, NSCAS overview. NSCAS overview is a good page for you to take a look at. If you don't know where to find something, it has a lot of information on it. It includes a lot of additional information down here in these pieces. So you have NSCAS administration, security information, current assessment presentations, our most recent presentations go there, those types of things. So this is a good place to look at things. Here is the accessibility manual and the tools. So the NSCAS overview is a good place to start if you don't know where to find something. For the summative, this just gives some basic information about the summative test and really directs you in to other places, to be quite honest, to find additional information. Each of the content areas, ELA, math, and science, have their own page, and there's lots of good information on these pages if you've never been to them before. The ALDs are here, and those, well, they're not there yet, but they'll be there soon. The TOS, or Table of Specifications, so this tells teachers what's on the test. I'll make a general note about this. You'll see this note, this information below was developed for NISA, but it's still applicable for NSCAS. So a lot of the things that we did, a lot of the works we did for NISA is still applicable, and you can still get good information about the questions. For instance, we have the related passages and ELA samplers. Here are independent writing items. And so there's good information on all of these pages. Math and science likewise have TOS. They also have old practice tests and those types of things on them. Science is the current test and not the new test, based on the new standards that will be out in 2021. Any information about that transition to the new science is going to be on this science transition page, including timelines, those types of things, a science fact. So the current science test will be here under NSCAS Science. Science transition is going to be on science assessment transition and where we're going. The alternate summative assessment information is here. I'd like to point you to the SPED links and determine an eligibility, how to determine if a student is eligible for the 1% test, the alternate test. We'll talk about that soon. We also have IEP decision-making guidelines, which are a good information. A lot of good information about this, and all these tests. So we have the table of specs, the TOS for all of the grade levels. We'll have achievement level descriptors for all of those as well as specific information about the alternate assessment. NSCAS ACT gives good information about the ACT and any documents prepared by NDE. It also contains the link to the ACT website. This has been newly redesigned, and I'm sure Iris is going to talk about it, but a lot of resources are put on this Nebraska ACT website, and that's an important link there as well. ELPA 21, I'm sure Terry will talk a little bit about this, but this gives some information about ELPA 21 and then directs you to her page and all the information there, and she'll talk about that later. We have information about the interim informative supports, and I'll talk about those, map growth and TestWiz, here in a little bit. I'm going to skip down to assessment vendors just for the sake of time here. The NWA portal is a huge page as far as resources go. All the manuals are going to be posted here. This is how you get to the test samplers, the practice tests that we called, the platform to log in, and then a lot of resources here, not only for assessment coordinators, but for technology coordinators, parents, and students. I'm not going to go over all of these now, but it includes videos, manuals, all of those pieces are on this page. Going to skip over a couple of these others here. Terry will talk about the NAPE page here a little bit later. And then technical reports, I'll talk about this very quickly. So technical reports we put out every year based on our assessment. If you're interested in those, you're more than welcome to read them. They're very lengthy, they're very technical. Psychometricians like those type of things, but it does give you a lot of good information if you're interested. And on the technical side, all the statistics behind all of our tests are located here as well. So those are things that you can look at if you're interested. We'll go back to the PowerPoint here. So talk a little bit about communication. So if you're not aware of this, you should be. You are the only DAC for your district. We decided a long time ago, long before I was at the State Department, that was the best way to go. Managing large lists of people and then people not knowing who's responsible on the district level created a lot of problems in the early days. So you are the only DAC for your district. I suggest that you work with your leadership team to determine how to communicate with within the district. Obviously, if you're the superintendent, you can make those decisions yourself. If you are some other DACs, we have principal DACs, we have counselor DACs, we have teacher DACs, we have superintendent DACs, we have curriculum director DACs. All of those DACs have to figure out what the best way to communicate with the rest of the people in their district and how to send that out. I know in some places they take every email and they forward it on to everybody. I'm sure in some places they make different decisions than that about who gets that information, and it's probably based on each individual piece. We are communicating now more with school people because of the ACT and how ACT has things set up, but that's only about ACT. And your person that you've designated as the school person for ACT. I also thought I should mention the fact that if others contact us, we don't just ignore them, right? So we try to answer every question that comes to us. If you have a teacher that reaches out to us, if you have a principal, whoever reaches out to us, we're going to try to respond with accurate information. But oftentimes, if we're going to also tell them that if things are district decisions, that they need to go back and talk to their district people. So we try not to undermine you in any way, but we also don't keep information from people. So know that if somebody contacts us, we're going to respond to them. Also know that if I think that the question is something beyond the mundane, that oftentimes will include you in the response so that you know that people are reaching out to us. We don't want, the last thing we want is to undermine you in your role. You are vital to our success and how we do things. And so we want you to know the same information and to know that if people are reaching out to us as well, because yeah, we're not in the business of making your lives difficult. So just know that we will respond to people that ask us questions. As you know, we send out emails. We send out more than we probably want to. We try to reserve those only for important things, though. If we think you need to know it, we're going to send an email. It's going to always be labeled as a DAC update. In general, we think those are important enough for you to pay attention to. And oftentimes, if it's about ACT, we'll include that information as well, because we know that certain people need that information in your district. Different people, high schools need that information. One of the new things we started last year was a biweekly update with NWA. NWA has a number of different supports they're offering to us at the statewide assessment office and to districts. And so NWA puts those biweekly partner emails together and sends those out, and those contain information well beyond summative. And what we've asked them to do is try to make it so that they repeat important information that continues to be coming soon towards you, but at the same time, we don't want them to repeat it so often that you guys just don't pay attention to those. So I would suggest a quick look through on those emails just to make sure you're up to date. But that's where that's coming from. NWA was putting that together, so that includes information about map growth. It includes information about TestWiz, includes information about Certified Facilitator Professional Learning Program. So those are includes additional information, but important information nevertheless. So we also have vendor emails. So we have, and since I left the other room, I don't have access to this right now, but we have a resource that we just put together. We're going to put it on the DAC page. We'll also send it out to everybody, but a list of who is going to be sending you emails. So we put together a list of all the people in the department that will possibly email you. We've also, in the department, I should say, in the assessment office, not in the whole NDE. But we also put together for all of our vendors. For instance, Rock Sharma is going to be sending information to you from NWA. Also know, and so we'll post that here actually later today probably, so that you have that, so that you can whitelist, make sure those aren't going to your junk mail. Obviously, Rock has sent you a lot of emails. In general, know that we are going to err on the side of communicating more than communicating less. Over the years, we've heard a lot of feedback about not getting enough information. I know that some people were upset about how often Rock was sending information out about when things were delayed. But we also had people that were waiting for that information. Larger districts, Omaha, Lincoln, those types of things were waiting because they had work they were going to do immediately. And so oftentimes I know with smaller districts that might not be on your radar to pay attention to all the time. But we think over communication is probably better than under communication. That's just generally how we see that. Okay. So we're going to talk about NSCAS Summative now. Try to give you a broad overview. Obviously, NSCAS Summative, we include the NSCAS General, which is provided our vendor partners NWA. the NSCAS Alternet, which our vendor partner is DRC, and NSCAS ACT. All three of these tests are summative tests, and these are the grades that that we test for. For ELA, we test 3 through 8 in high school, mathematics 3 through 8 in high school, science 5, 8 in high school. You probably know that, but I just want to make sure we're at the right level here. Also, stress this enough that high school is really third-year cohort, so it's really not based on students and their grade level, which is based on credits. It's based on how many years they've been in high school. So if we put a student on the roster for ACT, that means that we expect them to test. Maggie Sis is actually working to show you where you can get reports about who those students are well ahead of time. And if you disagree with any of those, you need to let us know ahead of time and not after the test, because once we test, or once the window's over, there's not really an opportunity to fix any of those pieces. So make sure you know who those students are and who we expect. We put those lists out for you, or those students are rostered for you. So I'm going to talk more about NWA, our partnership with NWA first, and the NSCAS General. We really wanted to put together a system of supports for districts to create a balanced assessment system. Like I said before, we can't create a balanced assessment system. Districts can do that. And so it's important for us that we have supports out there for you. Some districts are much more able to do those pieces than some of our other districts are. And so we're trying to put tools out there that make things easier for you, that are good resources for you. Other than the summative test, the summative NSCAS tests, all of these supports are optional. So the summative test is the non-optional piece. Everybody has to take it and do it. But interim map growth is optional. How you use it is optional. I'll talk about each one of these pieces here in a minute. Formative and classroom-based assessment pieces with TestWiz is also optional, how you use it. And whether you take part in the professional learning that's offered through the Certified Facilitator Program is also optional. You're on the ground making the best decisions for your district, and you can choose when you use those, when you don't use those. We want you to know what's available for you. So for the NSCAS General summative test, our vendor partner, like I said, is NWA. Test management and results are available through the Comprehensive Assessment Platform, or CAP. So you'll hear us talk about CAP. NWA will talk about CAP. You know CAP. Most of you know that CAP already, because that's the same system, same platform you access map growth through. It's a password protected user rights system. So basically what that means is that somebody has to have a password to get in, and you are the one that controls that. So if you want people to have more access or less access, that is entirely up to you and how you run things. Know that user rights are rolled over from year to year. And so if you want to change who has access, what level of access that they have, that's all up to you. If you need help with those things, NWA would be more than welcome to help you on that, to answer any questions about that. But you definitely control who gets information. If you want more information to your principals or even to teachers, you can do that. Just know that it has implications on what other information they have access to. So don't take those decisions lightly. Think about those and what's best for you and your district. NDE provides NWA with rosters in January. That's based on grade level, first of all. So all of the students in 3 through 8, all students in grades 3 through 8 are put into their system. With the exception of students that have the alternate assessment flag. You'll see that at the bottom there. And also based on FTE. So any student that is listed in your system as a full-time equivalency of 51% or more would also be included in this. So if you have a student that is a homeschool student, but they're with you 51% of the time. They're really your student more than they are a homeschool student at that point in time. And so we expect those students to test. Any students less than 51% are not expected and should not test. Like I said, the alternate assessment flag, which I'll talk about when we do the alternate here in a couple minutes, that information is submitted through the special education information. And so we don't include those students to the general rosters because they're going to be just sent to DRC. Student access to testing is done through a lockdown browser, NWA's lockdown browser. You can also, the lockdown browser also allows access to map growth. You need to install or distribute that to each device that the students are going to use during testing. Right now, the current version of that is out, and you can go ahead and use that. NWA will let us know if there is a new version that needs to be pushed out. Right now, it is the version that's out there is the current is what we anticipate using for testing. But if there is a new version that needs to be released before testing, summative testing, that will be done before January 1st. So right now, that's there. Your technology people, if they need information about that, this is NWA's partner portal. And there is a section down here for technology coordinators, which includes information about the summative and the formative pieces. And then map growth, there's also resources out there about map growth. If you're currently using map growth or have used map growth so far this year with the lockdown browser, then you should be pretty good to go. Questions about that technology piece should be directed to NWA though. I think everybody knows this because we put those out there already, but I wanted to make sure we put them out there again. We have a 7-week test window. That window is really 6 weeks for the initial. All of your testing should be scheduled in those first 6 weeks, and you should attempt to get all of it done in those 6 weeks. The last week is a makeup window only, and so you should not schedule testing for that week. It should be only makeup testing. And so anything you didn't get done in the previous 6 weeks, if you schedule in the last week and then you have snowstorms, if you have power outages, water main breaks, whatever the case may be, if you've only scheduled for that last week and don't get it done, there's very little we can do to avoid 0 scores at that point in time, or lowest scale scores at that time. So make sure you schedule as early in the window as you can, start testing and get it started so that you don't have issues at the end of testing. I wanted to put other key dates out here. This is not all the dates, but I think when I went through the dates, I thought these were the ones that were important to share at this point in time. So mid-November, I don't have a date for that yet, and I know it's the 5th of November already, so I need to get that scheduled, but we're going to give scheduling guidance out in mid-November. If you came to our regional workshops, we talked a little bit about how the information we have last year from the summative tests about how long it was taking students and those types of things. So that scheduling guidance will be available in mid-November. On January 9th, basically you want to make sure all of your student information is updated as much as possible in your student information systems. Any new students, any students that have left your district, those types of things, because that's the time that we're going to provide that information to NWA and actually all our vendors at that point in time. And so the more accurate it is, the less manual work you have to do later on. After January 9th, I should mention that any new students or students that have left your district, you have to take care of in each vendor system at that point in time. And so getting it as much up to date as possible will save you time and effort on the backside of that. On January 14th is a big day. There's going to be manuals and guides available. Also item samplers, which will be the new practice test, basically. We've moved away from calling them practice tests because they weren't intended as practice tests in the traditional sense of providing information back. They're really intended to be an exposure for students on how individual items work, how to engage in the tools and those types of things. So that's a big date. For resources for you in your district. On February 6th is the deadline to provide information back to us about paper pencil. Last year, total in the state of Nebraska, we only had 302 students take the general test on paper pencil. And so because of that, we can wait till February 6th to get this information. There's actually a window and you'll have opportunity to do it sooner than February 6th, but February 6th is the deadline to let us know which students are taking the paper pencil test as opposed to the online test. Instructions will be available closer to that time about how to do that, but that is the deadline. Starting on February 25th, you're going to have access to the management activities, creating sessions, making sure your rosters are up to date, all of those types of things. So that's a big date as well, that you have access to the summative information within CAP, the Comprehensive Assessment Platform. That's when you can start all of your activities as far as assigning students to proctors, doing test session work, like I said, updating students and those types of things. Obviously the window's in there. I didn't put the window on these dates because it's on the previous slide. But then May 7th is your deadline to return paper pencil and get any other information in the CAP system that you have. So that's the final deadline to get that information in. This is information about the general and alternate. I just wanted to make sure that these are out there again, that these are the 3 levels for the general and the alternate assessment: developing, on track, and college and career ready. These definitions are high-level policy definitions of those levels. The ALDs, which will be out soon, include additional information that might be useful to teachers about the skills and abilities of students that typically fall into those categories and those classifications. And so these just wanted you to be familiar with that language and make sure you have that. A couple of things that I'll point out about this. You'll notice that it talks about evidence, and this is a piece of evidence. We think very much so that the summative tests are only a small piece of what students have been, or one small piece of evidence to show what students are able to do. You have much more evidence. Your teachers have much more evidence. You have other assessment data, and that information is very important as well. We continue to try to get this message out that this is only one day in time. It's only a small piece of it, but I can't always control what the press and what policymakers do with this information and how much importance they put on it. We know because these things get put in the press that they're important to you, but it's also important to know that there's a lot of other good information that you should be banking your decisions on. NSCAS and for ELA and math, it's aligned to the Nebraska College and Career Ready standards, includes multiple choice and technology enhanced items. So the majority of items are multiple choice. Multiple choice are good, efficient items, but we also continue to add more technology enhanced items, which maybe allow students to show what they know at a deeper level. They also are, in many cases, more engaging. These might be drag and drops, hotspot text, other items like this that allow students to interact more with the item as opposed to just clicking a single answer or multiple answers. These are computer adaptive tests. We talked about this in the past, but the computer adaptive basically means as students get harder questions, or as students get questions correct, they get harder questions. It's important to note that those might not be visibly harder to a student, so they might not be able to look at them and tell what's harder or easier. Also, as students get miss questions, they get easier questions. Once again, they might not be able to tell, so it's important to let them know that they should just keep working hard and not try to guess if they got the last question right or not, because you can't always tell. We do have those paper accommodated forms. Like I said, only 302 students used those paper forms last year. Those include Braille, large print, and students that needed translation in languages other than English or Spanish, and side by side, so both English and Spanish side by side. And so very few students in the state were using those. Most were using those computer adaptive tests. Obviously, the paper tests are not adaptive. They are fixed form, and so we think most students are better served by being on the adaptive test when they can. The tests are currently untimed. We've had some discussion about timing those, putting time limits on these tests. We'll continue to talk about that. I'll talk more about that again when we do the scheduling information in mid-November. But you're able to divide them into multiple sessions, and we'll talk, like I said, in November you'll have much more information about scheduling and the best way to do those things. Talk about science just very briefly. This year's science test, the 2019 spring test, for both alternate and science is aligned to the Nebraska legacy standards. They include only multiple choice tests, and we are working towards new tests aligned to the Nebraska College and Career Ready science standards in 2021. And so we're testing old legacy standards because we're not in a point that we can test the new standards, but we're moving towards that test in 2021. This is a high-level timeline for that work. We're going to have a pilot this spring that we ask people to take part in that will give us good information. In 2020, in spring of 2020, we'll do a full field test. In that case, we'll be testing items, not students really. Students will take the test, but we're testing the items to make sure they work well, and then that full assessment in the spring of 2021. So NSCAS, just so you know, I wanted this information to be out there so that all results from NSCAS General are publicly reported. So every student that takes the test, just one second. Sorry about that. So all results are publicly reported. If a student takes a test at your district or school, it's reported to you on the NEP, the Nebraska Education Profile. Also, all of those results are fed into the AQuest accountability system. AQuest has a different set of guidelines for what is used. So, for instance, students have to be in the system for status for a full academic year. So they have to be there from basically the last Friday in September through the testing window and test there to be counted in most of the accountability measures. But I wanted you to know that this information obviously is important. The results are important. All the results are reported, but not all of them are necessarily used in the accountability system. I'm not prepared today. I didn't prepare accountability information, but there are some differences there, just so you know that. Talk about some of the other pieces as well about that are provided by NWA. So NSCAS interim, the state of Nebraska is now paying for MAP growth in grades 3 through 8. You're able to decide what grades you want to use, which tests you want to use. If you want to use all 3 sessions in the school year, fall, winter, spring, that is great, fine with us. You're able to do that. You could also test in the summer if you wanted to. There's that available as well to you. But you can choose to do it 2 times a year if you want, 3 times a year. That's all up to you. It's there for you, and you are able to determine what's best for your district and what information is useful to you. Um, Also, as far as what you're going to be using in school improvement processes and those types of things. I'd also like to point out that if you would like to use any other MAP growth products, the primary schools or up into 9th and 10th grade, you're able to have a contract with NWA and to provide those tests to you as well. I know some districts use those, some districts don't. But really, you control this. Those results are computer adaptive, and basically you get immediate results. This is better information for teachers, schools, and districts because of the turnaround time and because of the work that they have done. That doesn't mean it's the only thing you should be using. You should be looking at all of the information in conjunction. But the information is good information and is more useful probably to inform teaching and curriculum pieces than the summative. It's just designed that way. So rostering is a district responsibility. We don't have anything to do with that. We don't upload that information, so you have to take care of it on your end. Know that rostering, I should say the one exception to that is spring rostering. So rostering for spring MAP and NSCAS summative are essentially the same thing. And so when you have students rostered for one, they are rostered for the other. NSCAS formative classroom assessment. TestWiz is an optional assessment tool. It's a computer-based assessment tool. You can do online delivery or paper pencil delivery with bubble sheets that can be scanned in. You choose, once again, how you use this tool. But you would create the assessment. So your educators in your district would create assessments. You can do that at the district level. You can do it at the classroom level. However you want to use it, you have access to 2 item banks. The first item bank is the Navigate item bank. This was created by a testing company. The Navigate item bank was created by a testing company. It includes items for ELA, math, science, and social studies. Those items have been aligned to the Nebraska standards. We don't vouch for their quality or anything like that. That they are there for you to use. It's that bank. There's over 70,000 items in that bank, and they're there if you think they would be useful in whatever processes you have in your district. We also have the Check for Learning bank. That bank was created by Nebraska educators. Those items were aligned in many cases directly to the Nebraska standards. What I would say is there's only about 7,000 items in there for ELA math and for science, and that Check for Learning bank is a little bit antiquated at this point in time. We're working on plans to how to revitalize that and maintain it. There are some good pieces in there. But they need more. They need additional math items, additional ELA items, and they are aligned to the old legacy science standards. So keep that in mind. If you have questions about that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions about how that bank, those banks might be useful to you. Everything in the system is auto-scored and well, except for there's some text-dependent analysis questions that wouldn't be auto-scored. And then they provide pretty good reporting back to you and your teachers. You can use them in multiple ways, once again, based on district need. I have some districts that create common district assessments there, some teachers that do L to J model with small weekly quizzes. There's a lot of different ways that could be used. And a lot of options there for you. Once again, rostering is a district responsibility. TestWiz and Certica, the company that makes TestWiz, has set it up so that you can do some auto rostering pieces. And so that's nice, and you can take advantage of that. The last piece to talk about with NWA's contract is the NSCAS professional development. So you probably, NWA had a certified facilitator program in the state of Nebraska previous to our contract. We had quite a few educators, not only mostly from ESU's, professional development people from ESU's, but also some districts as well. And that basically was a trainer of trainer models. NWA would train the certified facilitators, then the certified facilitators could take that training out to districts. We now have up to 72 certified facilitators in the state, both ESUs and district educators. Many of our large districts have one of their personnel that, because they give their own, oftentimes do their own professional development, and so we have 72 people that can offer different professional learning experiences, including assessment literacy, using MAP growth and NSCAS results, creating quality goals. The list goes on. I didn't list them all here, but we also put that information out for you, so who you can contact in your ESU or in your district to do some of that professional development. We think pieces like assessment literacy can only enhance what's going on in the state of Nebraska. We've long been known because of the STARS era of having a high-level assessment literacy, but I think that's probably dropped off in recent years since the switch to NISA. And so we really want to try to bring that back, and to make a lot of our new teachers as assessment literate as our experienced teachers. And so those types of things we think are important. Obviously, how to use MAP growth and NSCAS results are hugely important moving forward. And so these are just some of the things that we're doing to try to support you in the work that you're doing. Okay, I am going to take just a minute here, and I want to check the chat and see if we have any questions right now that I should take a look at. Just 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. That's going to be better. Everybody still hear me?
Can't see me ever.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any questions yet, but if you do have them, please let us know. So talk a little bit about Alternet here. Our vendor partner for Alternet is DRC. Test management and results are available through eDirect. So I'll go there just real quick. Or maybe I won't. Okay, so eDirect, you can go there anytime. It's password protected user rights system, just the same as NWA's CAP system. and so you control once again who gets this information, who has access to it. NDE provides DRC with rosters in January, just like NWA. What I would say is this is the order of how that information is given. So any student that has the alternate assessment flag marked is sent to DRC. So it's really important that you have that information correct in your system. As far as the special education information and what's uploaded to advisor. So that's what we base all that information on. It. You don't have to tell us those students. We can see it in the system. We pull those students and send those. If it's not right, then you have to manually fix it later on. It's based on grade levels once again. So alternate assessment in grades 3 through 8 and high school. And then FTE, so obviously, once again, students that are more than 51% of the time. So students and proctors have access to testing through DRC's Insight lockdown browser. That needs to be installed or distributed to devices. It's a limited number of devices, so you only have to have devices, the number of devices for basically the number of students you have, or maybe the number of proctors you have, because of the nature of this test. It's a one-to-one test. So even if you had 5 students, if the same proctor was giving it to all the students, you'd only need it on one device. So much smaller scale that you need this to have it on the number of devices. So technology information is available inside in eDirect. eDirect has the ability to make a technical director basically role, and then they'll have access to do all the downloads and installation and those types of things. So technology information is available inside that eDirect system. So Alternet is intended for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. I can't stress that enough. This is typically about 1% or less of the population. For instance, last year we actually had a student with a primary disability of speech language. Most speech language students would obviously not have significant cognitive disabilities. They have another type of disability and most likely do not qualify for this test. And so it's important that we look at the eligibility requirements for who needs this test, because federal guidelines only allow for 1% of the students to take the assessment at the state level. Like I said, that's the state level, 1% at the state level. Districts can go over that 1%, and there's many good reasons you might go over that 1%. For instance, you might have less than 100 students taking the tests, in which case one student would be 1% of the students, and so, or more than 1% of the students. And so while you can go over that 1%, the state has to stay at 1%. Any district that's going to go over the 1% has to offer a justification letter as to why they're going to go over. With that being said, it's really important that you use the Indy guidelines for eligibility. If you're going to go over the 1%, then you need to make sure, and actually this is for all students, that you're using those guidelines for eligibility. Also, other reasons you might go over that are good reasons that you might go over. In some places, there's, say, a regional a program that you're running in your district, and therefore you have more students come to your program. Therefore, you might go over your 1% because other districts don't have those students anymore, and therefore are staying under their 1%. So we had a question pop up in chat, and I'll come back to that one in a second. So in general, make sure your teachers are using those guidelines for eligibility, because we're looking at that, and basically we have to get under that 1%. ELA and math are aligned to the Nebraska College and Career Extended standards. For the alternate test, we've extended the regular standards. Basically, we're looking at underlying skills, and basically the students that take this test should be learning, these should be their learning objectives, right? These extended indicators. They are underlying skills, but they should always, those students should be always moving towards and trying to get to the regular set of standards if at all possible. The science is aligned to the legacy extended standards. This test is only multiple choice with 3 answer options. It's a little bit simplified for these students, which we would expect for students with significant cognitive disabilities. It is a one-to-one administration, so it's a read aloud by a proctor. So basically the majority of the test, only which is detailed in the manual, is read aloud by the proctor. It can be computer or paper pencil. So the last year we started allowing the students to interact with it with touch devices, because some students are used to using those devices on a regular basis, and so they could actually touch those devices in those answers in response. In any case, the proctor enters or records the responses for the student in the system. And so everything has to be put in through the computer. We did offer recorded training for proctors last year, so they understood how to do that. I would highly recommend that you have all of your proctors that are going to give this test watch that training. We'll probably record it again and release it again. Know that you will receive no materials for this test. All of the materials for this test must be printed. You get into eDirect and you print those materials for your teachers, your proctors, the student books. All of it must be printed. The good news about that is you don't send anything back. The responses must be entered into the system. Also know, and I didn't talk about this before, but 1% of our students, so 1% of our students are actually more diverse in their skills and abilities than 99% of the rest of the students. In other words, the 99% of the students that take the general test are more alike than the 1% of students that take the alternate assessment. What that means is making a test for all of those diverse students is really difficult. It's actually probably impossible to make a test that serves all of those students well, because we have students that are basically non-responsive all the way up to students that are almost ready to have the general assessment. In the case of a non-responsive student, all students, if you must give at least 1 item to every student, and if you think a student would be non-responsive going forward, you can stop giving that test out after that point, and then you can mark that student as non-responsive. You don't have to give them the whole test if you think the student is not going to be responsive. The alternate summative test is the same test dates. This includes high school alternate. So know that for your students that are taking the ACT, they have their own test schedule. For alternate students at high school, they have the same schedule that everybody else has, that same 6-week window with a 1-week makeup. So some due key dates here again for you. So September 12th, we posted online tools training material in eDirect. You can log on to eDirect. Basically, those are practice materials for students. So there are questions and grade bands. We expanded the number of questions at that for alternate students this year. know that if you need more materials, you could also go up or down a grade level, because the materials aren't that different for students. If they need help and practice how to interact with that test, you could give materials outside of grade level just for practicing for students. January 9th, we're going to provide DRC with these rosters. Once again, that's the deadline for you to make sure all of your information is as up to date as possible. February 18th, districts will have access to management activities. So once again, you'll be able to get into eDirect. You'll be able to see the students that are in there. You'll be able to add new students, take students out, whatever the case may be, starting at February 18th. On March 4th, you'll be able to print manuals and student booklets from eDirect. So the window doesn't start until, right, March 18th, but starting on March 4th, you'd be able to print materials for the alternate assessment to provide to your teachers. And then May 3rd is a deadline to enter any student responses or accommodations. So you need to make sure that you get all of those responses entered, accommodations entered. After May 3rd, there's no opportunity to do this. We don't have a mechanism to let you turn stuff in late. So make sure all of your teachers have gotten all the responses entered, all the proctors, all the responses into the system. The levels for alternate are the same as general. It's the same exact slide. We use the same definitions for both of these. Also know that the results are used in exactly the same way. Alternate results are in most cases combined with the general results when we report them because the numbers are so small. There is some alternate functions as a subgroup on the NEP, so you can look at just alternate, but if you have too few of students, oftentimes that is going to be masked. Results can be accessed also through, reports are also accessible through eDirect, so you can see last year's reports and everything through that. But as far as publicly reported, this goes through the NEP. These results use the same set of rules as the general as far as what feeds into the accountability system. So full academic year and those types of things for most indicators, but this information is used for both reporting and AQuest accountability. Okay, so NSCAS accessibility, just want to talk really briefly about that. So we produce NSCAS Summative and Alternate Accessibility Manual. That includes accommodations, linguistic supports, and universal supports for all students. We're working on an updated version of that. It's very similar to last year. There's very few changes, mostly clarifications and an addition of one other accommodation. It includes tools 1 through 3 in a short form, so that gives basically a list of the accommodations or the supports that are available. All teachers, all SPED teachers should read the entire manual and be familiar with all of that information. The tools, the short form is really for reference for IEP meetings and to be able to just check back at things. So really encourage you to make sure that all of your special education staff has access to that manual and is familiar with all of the material in it. Also, all of your EL teachers that are also familiar with that information, because there's a lot of information about linguistic supports in there as well. So that's an important manual. When we release the new version, we'll send an email out to everyone and we'll post it on the website. Know that writing rules in a manual, no matter how long it is for all students is almost impossible, right? So making a set of accommodations, a set of rules for all students, because there are students that have individual needs, individual special circumstances. That being said, in most cases, the manual does a good job for like 99.9% of students. The answers are there for you. We're always willing to answer questions, but if you think you have a special case, please contact NDE for those questions. I had one the other day of a student that is fluent in American Sign Language and had special needs as far as that goes. So ask those questions, but for most of your students, emphasize that again, for most of your students, the accessibility manual gives you the information that you need. If you ever have one of those special circumstances or need questions or have questions, please let us know. So accommodations for students with IEPs must be recorded in those IEPs and used in daily instruction. So to get an accommodation on for a student with an IEP on the summative test, that needs to be used daily and in the IEP. Also, do not assume that more is better. Sometimes accommodations will get in a student's way as opposed to help them. If they're not used to using it on a daily basis, then it's probably something that might distract them as opposed to help them. So be very cautious about just throwing all the accommodations at a student because it's not guaranteed to help. Hopefully by the time we get to the summative test, your teachers will have a pretty good idea of what support students need to be successful. The manual, once we release it, will not change during the year, but districts can submit suggestions for the future. If you have additional accommodations you think should be in the manual, additional supports you think should be in the manual, please send us emails and let us know, and we will convene a committee to look at those and see if we should add those. Both NWA and DRC have mechanisms in CAP and eDirect that allow you to tell us what supports are used for a student, right? So it's supports that are used, not just that are available to a student, but what is used. Know that it's a subset of the supports in the manual, so we don't need to know everything that a student uses. There's some certain things that we want to track and be able to know. There's also certain supports that a student has that if they have access to them, we'll already know that. Text-to-speech is a good example of that. So it's really important that any accessibility supports that a student used are marked in the system. We'll give information about how to do that closer to that time, but it's important that you tell us that information so we can continue to make good decisions on how to support those students. Some of this is for research, so we can look into differences and how successful or how if students struggle that have certain supports or don't have certain supports. So make sure you get those put into the systems, either in CAP for the general by May 7th or the alternate in eDirect by May 3rd. Really important that you do that for us. Questions need to be directed to NDE, and I should have put Terry Schuster on here too. So myself, Sharon Heater for IEPs, and Terry Schuster for students for linguistic supports. Also, I am planning on doing an accessibility Q&A question and answer session in January or February. Any of your teachers will be able to get onto this, your special education directors, EL teachers, whoever you would like. It's going to be somewhat limited, I think, to 300 people because that's all Zoom can handle with our current account. But we'll put that out there and record that, but it'll be a Q&A for everybody, and that's currently planned, and I'll get you more information about that as well. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do this last slide here. I was going to do it at the end of the presentation, but I'm going to do it now. So I wanted to talk about some of the ways that we get input from you and from the field. So we have an assessment and an accountability advisory, an AAA committee. We have about 50 to 60 people on that. from across the state. We have teachers, we have DACs, we have principals, superintendents, we have partners from ESUs and other organizations. We meet about twice a year. We bring questions to them and get good feedback on decisions that we're making and things that we should think about. So we're actively engaged in that way. We also have a technical advisory committee. This is made up of 5 individuals, 3 national experts in assessment and 2 state people that give us information on the technical nature of assessments and give us advice on those particular things. We bring important questions to them a couple of times a year about how to approach specific technical issues like the standard setting or alignment studies, those types of things. So know that we're getting feedback there. We'll also put out surveys. One of the things that I'd say this last year is that NWA did a great job of putting out information and trying to on how to improve all different aspects of the accountability or this assessment system. So we'll be looking for your feedback in multiple ways there. The last thing I'll say is you're always welcome to email or call us with feedback. If you have concerns about anything, if you have questions about anything, please call. What I'd like to say in general is we put out tons of information. We know that we have multiple vendors now. We have 3 different vendors. Additionally, the Alpha 21 vendor. So we know there's a lot of information. There's lots of differences out there. We try to, like I said earlier, communicate, if anything, over communicate. That being said, your time is valuable. If you ever have a situation where you can't find the answer easy, feel free to email or call us, because we want you to not spend time searching for answers. We'd rather have you spend time helping your students, helping your teachers, doing the things that are important every day in schools. And so you feel free to provide feedback to us. Hopefully it's constructive feedback, but we do always welcome your calls and questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And answer those questions as best we can. So with that, I'd like to open it up for different questions. I have a question here in the chat about, it says, does the lockdown browser mean that it would have to be installed or on all hardware running the state test? Basically, yeah. So a lockdown browser, it's basically the same as you would do with the NWA. So it's only the devices that a proctor for Alternet, that a proctor or a student would be engaged in, and so it's only one per student taking that test. But it does have to be installed on the that lockdown browser has to be installed just like it is with the NWA. So I have another question about historical data. One thing that to note is that a lot of historical data is not accessible through the vendors anymore because of the change in contracts last year. You can find what reports are available for Alternet and eDirect. Obviously, the new reports are available in CAP for this for last school year. Anything older than that, you'd probably have to access NEP, and that's going to be limited. And so we're kind of in this place right now where you don't have a lot of information. You can always contact us and we can try to help, but that's really tough to get you any detailed information. So like I said, you can contact us if you have questions about that. If anybody has additional questions, you can unmute yourself and share that with the group, or you can put in a chat right now. Amazingly, despite all of the problems at the beginning, we're about 5 minutes ahead of schedule. So if you have questions, coming up here, we're going to have Iris talking about ACT. We're going to talk about NAEP skills and ELPA 21, and then have more time for questions and answers as well. One other thing I should let you know is we're also, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but this is the first time we've ever offered this particular piece for new DACs. We have over 50 new DACs in the state this year, and we thought it was probably important that we try to support you the best way we could. We're going to probably send out a survey this afternoon that asks about 3 questions to see if this was helpful. I know that this would probably been helpful a little earlier in the year, but to see if we got the right grain size, right? Are we too detailed? Are we not detailed enough? And do you think this helped? And so we'll try to find out if you think it did or not, and that way we can make a good educated decision on whether we would offer it in the future to new DACs as well. Okay, I am still, I'm not seeing any other questions as of yet. So in the interest of saving time, let's go ahead and take the 10-minute break now.
This is Iris Owens. I am the project coordinator with ACT, as Jeremy mentioned earlier, and thanks for joining us. We're going to go through some things about ACT. Probably I'm not going to cover it as extensively as Jeremy covered other things this morning. So if you have specific questions, please let me know, and I will do my best to get you that information. I know some of the information has already come to you, but let's just go through a few of the things about the ACT and some important things you'll need to know this year. So the ACT test is not necessarily an assessment test. However, we're using it for the 3rd year cohort, not the juniors, not the sophomores, but those kids who have been in high school for 3 years. So we want to make sure that you get that information correct in your data when we get those kids signed up, and you'll have less issues with data at the end of the year when you're getting ready for accountability. And that's important to you just as much as it is important for those kids to take the test. So each spring we take the test. This will be our 3rd year taking the ACT as an assessment. All students at your school other than the 1% alternate will be taking the test, will be considered eligible for taking the test. Homeschool students, if you have those, they have to be the 51% or more. Any students that you have in a Rule 18 or a special program will also be required to take the test. And it's really important to make this communication available between you and the Rule 18 or the special program, and make sure that that you're communicating with each other on how that process goes. If you need more information on that, please let me know. You'll have a choice of the paper and pencil or online, and I'll talk more about the online test later. And one last thing is NDE will be providing a roster in January for ACT to put your kids in for the test. So here we're going to move on to test dates. Paper and pencil test date is April 2nd, 2019. It is the online testing. You can take it April 2nd to the 4th or the 9th through the 11th. Those are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday dates. You can use the online for makeup if you so choose. You may take the paper and pencil, and if you have some select students who you think would do better on the online test, you can also do that. You just have to go through the process of being prepared for the online test. We'll talk more about that later. Accommodation test dates. This is like those kids who are doing extended time, have multiple days, they have Braille, they have IEPs or 504s, you know, those students that have those special needs, and these are dates for them. There's paper and pencil dates, there's online dates. And then we have the makeup test, which is April 24th. That's paper pencil. And then there is no makeup specific date for online. So you can use any of those online dates for makeup, but there isn't a specific makeup date for the online test. And then there's makeup for paper accommodations. Okay, so Here's some contacts. You're going to be receiving emails about the ECT from the following. You can get them from state testing at act.org or ACT Accommodations or myself. And I have two emails. I have my ACT email or my nebraska.gov email, and you can contact me with both of those as well. And then to contact, if you as a DAC or your test coordinator or your counselor or your principal or anybody at your school has questions, please feel free to email me or call me at 402-471-4316. You can contact customer support, and those are definitely technical questions if you have them. And I got that number there, and also the times and the availability, as well as accommodations. Okay. We have a new web page at ACT. Well, it's the same web page address, but they've updated it. It's really going to be a lot easier for you, especially now that you have all of you new DACs to access what's available as far as the good stuff on the website. This is what the opening page, the intro page looks like. There's a little video that you can watch on how to utilize this web page. The test dates on the video are incorrect. Don't worry, that's going to get fixed, but those are not our test dates. It's going to give you each one of the products that the state of Nebraska has made available to your districts, the ACT test and all of those resources, pre-ACT if you made that choice, or ACT online prep. Those are great. You just click on those little blue buttons and you'll get all kinds of resources. So here's the important page, the ACT test page. Test dates on the left-hand side. You have direct links to the programs we use. Pearson Access Next, or we call it PA Next, and the Test Accessibility and Accommodation System, TAA, which is where you send in your request for accommodations. You've got general question numbers, a contact form, accommodations, all those great things. Down here on the left corner, schedule of events. My first request is that you download that PDF and print it off. It has all of the information. Hang on a second, I want to get to, hang on one second, here we go. Where did it go? Okay, there, thank you. So I got Tyrena helping me because, you know, we're going to show you this schedule of events. It's not showing on the screen though. It won't show on the screen. Okay, here we go.
Oh, did I take it up?
Yeah. No, I want this. Posted, sorry. A little technical difficulty. Give me 2 seconds here. Okay. So we're going to go to that schedule events. I want you to print it off and take a good look at all those great details. If you have more questions about that, we're gonna move on because it's not. Can I get to this again? How do I do that? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, back with you. So schedule of events has all the information you are gonna want. That's really important. Here is some information that you can get about the ACT test, what's new with state testing, and some other information. On the left, it'll give you resources, and on the right, it'll give you tips for success. This is what I really like about the new website. It just gives you just little snippets of what's really important, like mark the important dates from your schedule of events on the calendar, set yourself reminders for those deadlines. Really huge, important information that's going to help you. So moving on to ACT accommodations. The accommodations window actually opened today, and you are going to be able to apply today until Friday, February 15th. They're made available for any student who has an IEP or a 504 plan. These can be requested on the TAA system. If you need any assistance with that, please contact myself or the Accommodations Department. One thing I did notice that I didn't add to this is that we also do have EL supports, and those are also going to be available starting today that you can request. There's some information on the webpage about what EL supports are available, any of those great things. But if you have more questions, contact me. Apply for your accommodations as early as possible. The sooner you apply, the sooner you'll find out if it's been approved, or if it's not been approved, what you need to provide to get approved. Those are really important things. There's just some information they may need. If it's denied, it's not the end of the world. You can read submit and add some more information if possible. So I really encourage you to do that as early as possible. Apply for your accommodations for your students. Accommodations analysts are looking for information on what happens in the classroom. So they want you to provide your IEP or 504 plans, and there's a teacher survey on the TAA system and other materials that you or your staff believes will give a complete picture of the student's needs. Include all of that, because it's going to just help you get that acceptance sooner, and gives them a better idea of what's going to happen in the classroom, and that's what they really want to know. That's just my suggestions to you. So PA Next also opened today, and the TAA system. PA Next is a system where you're going to find student lists in January. Right now it's going to give you a choice to do managed participation, which is how are you going to take the test? Are you going to take a paper and pencil for the most part, or are you going to test online? That information needs to be answered before November 30th. Again, schedule of events, please, make copies of that. I highlight mine to pieces, just so you know. The new look, I hope you like that. There's new manuals, and there'll be webinars. There'll be an accommodations question and answer on November 14th. There'll be a link to that on your schedule of events page. There's also going to be some test administration question and answers in January 15th and February 13th. All of those will be at 10 a.m. Central Time. And there'll be links on that schedule of events page for you to request participation. There's a quick shot of the schedule of events. Pearson Access and PA Next. As I said, this is where your students are going to be. This is what it looks like when you pull it up. testadmin.act.org. Bookmark that page. You're going to be in there a lot. I know you guys have a lot to do with ACT, so I'm trying to make this as easy as possible for you. That's my goal. So when you do have questions, when you have hiccups of some kind, I want to be able to help you as much as possible. So that's what that page looks like. And then you'll get a login. You should already have a username and a password. If not, contact me. This is what the main page looks like. So you'll have setup where it provides you can find your list of students. You'll have all kinds of things, testing, how you want to test. You'll set up your online test lists for students here. And then in the end of the year, we'll be able to access reports with the data that ACT provides to you, both their ACT reports and state accountability. The other system that we have is the CCRIS. I know, lots of crazy things that you have to remember. But if you bookmark this, this is the TAA system and how to log in for pre-ACT. Some of your districts have pre-ACT. Oh, I'm so sorry. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute here. The other website you might want to know about is TestNav. This is the online testing site. this is where you'll do your online testing if you have, if you're going to do it for your makeup kids or you're going to do all of your kids online. This is the system that you're going to do it through. If you are not going to use online testing, it's still really great to know where this is, because as I've got highlighted in a little yellow, there's a practice test that your kids can take online. And it breaks it up into sections. It'll give you the English test, the math test, the reading test, the science test, and a writing prompt. Now it'll score raw scores for you. It won't give you a composite score, but it'll give you raw scores so your students can see how they're doing. And the writing prompt does not score at all, but they will have that experience. They'll have a practice of how that all processes. And it gives them a little timer so they know how long it takes them to process, to get through the test sections. It's a great tool to have. Online testing. You can use it for all your students, partial students, or it's a makeup option. The manual has several updates. Please look at that manual. We've tried really hard to make it easier for you to read the manuals so they're not as vague. 2 things to remember if you're going to, if your district or school's going to test online, is to complete the mock administration completely and to lock down your browser. Those are the keys to success. Online accommodations. If you have accommodated students and you want them to test online, you have to request that in TAA. And there's a phone number for the accommodations department if you have any questions about that. NDE this year, the previous years, they've offered ACT online prep as an option, as a prep guide or a prep tool for your kids to get ready for the ACT test. This year, the districts, not individual schools, but each district was given the option of pre-ACT or the ACT online prep. Superintendents were given a survey and they chose one of those options for NDE to purchase for the district. Option 1, the ACT online prep, is for each third-year cohort student, those kids who are going to be testing in April, and they will have AOP available to them for 365 days from their initial login. That would be, so if you got it in October and you signed your kids right up, it would be if they got it on October 9th, then they have it all the way until October 8th of next year. So they can use it over the summer and in the fall if they're going to test again as seniors. So wanted to make that highly usable for your students. Then option 2 is the pre-ACT test. Boy, that really is a mouthful, isn't it? Each student can choose from a fall test window for juniors or sophomores or the spring test window for sophomores only. Here are the for the pre-ACT. For I've got the information on any assistance with the pre-ACT or the email address for them if you have any issues with technical difficulties. ACT online prep, that opened in September. If you need additional licenses for your students or your instructors, please just send me an email. It's really easy for me to access that and provide that for you. Like I said, once the student logs in, that access is for 365 days. The online prep provides 2 practice tests and 2 writing prompts. The practice tests will give you a composite score, and then the writing prompts are also AI scored with, it also has additional sample questions for each section, has all kinds of opportunities for learning in that. Oh my gosh, I went really fast, I'm sorry. But does anyone have any questions for me?
Jeremy, did you see any questions on chat? There are no questions.
Yeah, there's no questions on chat yet.
Okay.
Give everybody just a second to
Sure, absolutely.
If anybody you could either unmute yourself and just ask your question, or you could put that through chat. Oh, we could see it just then, Iris.
Yeah, Irina got that figured out for me. Thank you.
You want to
Yeah.
show it?
Yep.
Show
Hang
it.
on. That's it. Let me go through this real quick with you. So here's some test dates. That test window, just like I showed before. Here's a schedule. So like, here's the major thing that's happening right now is managed participation. And that's just telling us what you want to do, how you want to test. Then there's the accommodations right here. And that closes on February 15th. I'm going to say that again. And then also checking your students. Those won't be loaded until January, and then we'll have until February 15th to verify that information and make sure that's all correct. Let me scroll
There's a
down.
chat. Is it too late to change the option of ACT prep or pre-ACT?
Yes, unfortunately, it is too late to change that option for AOP or pre-ACT for this year. If you want more information, if your district is interested in purchasing the opposite, then please contact me and I will get you that information. And then we hope to have that information out to you earlier next year, your options, so that you can talk that over with your superintendent and have a discussion about what's best for your students in your district.
Another question. Where can we go to print the PPTs?
So the PowerPoints, we're going to send out the PowerPoints later today to all the participants, and then we're going to post it on the DAC page as well. So you'll be able to print. You can't print them right now, but we'll give you access later today for those. Okay.
So here's some of those trainings that I was talking about. The ACT accommodations training. Here's that link if you want to register for that on next Wednesday. Then there's one in January and one in February for test administration, and that just goes through the rules of how to test, what's expected of you, what's expected of your test coordinator, that kind of stuff. So it's going to give you, I don't know if you noticed this, that there's white, that is for the paper pencil or general information. There's this light gray, that's all accommodation deadlines. And the dark gray is all online deadlines. So that helps you a little bit. So if you're thinking something accommodations, look for that light gray. If you're looking on online, you're looking for the dark gray. Okay. Oh, there is one more thing I wanted to talk about, is that the date to order makeup testing is April 3rd. And Jeremy and I just discussed this, that students arriving after that date, we would like you to try and test them if you have the opportunity to order materials or test them online. But you won't be penalized if they don't test. So April 3rd is the last date that we're looking at for students who arrive in your district.
Yeah, so it's important to note on that, Iris, that those students wouldn't count in the accountability system anyway because of full academic year. But in general, if you can give students an opportunity to take that test either online or with additional materials that you might have, it would be better for most students if you gave them the opportunity to test. But as far as students that would count in the accountability system, they would not. So, but any student that does a test would be reported. So I just know that as well. So that's kind of the deadline. We also have a question, Iris. It says, I'm interested in hearing how other schools anticipate their staff using AOP. Do an administration just give them information and turn them loose, or are staff members given a timeline to follow? I can share what I know anecdotally, and then anybody else could jump in for DACs from other districts if you have information on that. So in general, the AOP didn't give as much information as we originally thought it was going to. One of the reasons we offered the pre-ACT as well. but in general, it was hard to get information out of it for staff to use. But I know there are some staffs, some school districts that have expectations for how the teachers are going to use it with their students, and some don't. I think there's probably a mix. Does anybody else want to jump in and provide additional information about how they're using AOP?
I know also that several districts utilize they may have an hour that they have with their juniors so that they utilize for other things, and then they take that, and when it gets ready, they're getting close to test time, they have specific things they want to do with their kids, then they sign them up to do specific tasks to prepare them for the test. And know several of those districts really find that that's a great way to help those students utilize the AOP to the best of their abilities.
We also had a response there from Palmyra. I believe everyone can see that about how they, what they do, and so how they use it. So that's there for you as well. Thank you. From Palmyra.
They break their junior class up into teams with the teacher.
Iris, do you have anything else?
That's about it. I did really want to show you this, so I'm glad that we could get that up for you. Just scroll through that. And
okay, so let's go ahead and switch over to Terry and Terry O, and she's going to talk to you about NAPE. So I'll give her a second to transition up there. Oh, we do have another question here, and I think I can answer it, Iris. So one more question: is there a benefit for having students take the test online versus paper pencil? Yes, I believe there are some benefits. One of the benefits is you don't have to worry about the timing. So timing for ACT is a huge responsibility for a proctor, making sure that they give the proper time, that students don't have extra time. If there is a mistiming in the administration, there is the possibility that very real possibility that ACT could invalidate all the students in a classroom. We've had that happen where the teacher missed time, they gave them an extra 5 minutes, and every student in the classroom was invalidated. And so that's one thing you don't have to worry about on the online test, is it takes care of all the timing for you. Another benefit is the fact that students, the most common invalidation reason we get for students is working ahead or behind on the test. So when time is called, students can't go back to a previous test or work ahead to answer questions. And so the online test does not allow them to do that. They can't see those items, so they can't work ahead or behind and then therefore get their test invalidated. The other thing that I would say is that because we give the writing test, most of our students, I would think, probably, and this isn't all students, please keep in mind, but most of our students would prefer to type a response as opposed to writing it out longhand. There's probably a mix of those. That's true. With that being said, there's also some risk, right? So if your computer system goes down or those types of things, a couple of years ago when we did this, we had a district give a online test, and the power for their whole city went out, and so all the students lost connectivity and they got kicked out of the test. When they got back up and running again, ACT actually added some time back into the test so they could catch up to where they were if they were reading a passage or whatever the case may be. In the end, they didn't think that it adversely affected them. We've also had several districts have a lot of success. We also had some districts that had some problems. So there's some risk with it. If you're thinking about doing it, like Iris said, it's really important that you do the whole mock administration, and if you and that you lock down your browser to make sure that no changes happen after that time. And so we think districts can be very successful with it, but we know that your individual district and your circumstances have a lot to do with what happens and whether you can support that or not. the other thing that I'd say is if you have a mix of students that want to take the test online and some that want to take paper pencil, you can do that as well and accommodate all of their wishes, depending on the size of your district, the number of devices you have in that. If you want to talk about that more, I encourage you to call Iris and get more information. But there's pros and cons to just about every decision you're going to make, and those are some of them. So thank you. Terry, go ahead.
Okay. I am Terry O, you're very friendly, and I do want to emphasize friendly, NAPE coordinator for the state of Nebraska. The biggest difference about the NAPE is it is a federal national test. It is not from the state of Nebraska, but is administered through the state of Nebraska. So these are the questions that I hope to answer in the next few minutes. I'll just let you read through each bullet on your own. I am not surprised, but I often get the question, what is NAPE? And NAPE is the largest. 50,000 Nebraska students will participate in NAPE this year, or nationally, excuse me. 50,000 kids across the United States will participate in NAPE this year. And it's nationally representative, which means not every student in Nebraska will take it. And it's continuing. So we've been doing NAPE since the 1960s. And it does show what students can do in various content areas. I got this quote from the Nation's Report Card, and the Nation's Report Card is a website that displays the results of the NAPE. And this particular definition says it's a wake-up call. And to some degree, I think it is. I do think NAPE has a lot of value. I think it alerts educators, policymakers in particular, and elected officials, and gives them kind of a warning bell that education is important and that we need to continue to give education our focus and our funding. Here's some headlines. Typically, when you see NAPE in the paper, it's not always a real positive headline. The top one, NAPE shows little gains in math reading, or Education Next said, could the disappointing 2017 NAPE scores be due to the Great Recession? But really good things come out of published articles too. The one that's semi-covered up from the New York Times, they did their own little research study, and they found out that when states spend additional money on their lowest income schools, they see more academic improvement. Well, I think that's a very positive result from the NAPE tests. How are the scores reported? Well, take comfort in knowing that they are not reported at the school level. Unlike the state assessment, results will not be tied to your school, nor will they be tied to the student themselves. In fact, student identities are kept strictly confidential. It is not tied to accountability. There are a few states in the US that do tie it to their accountability, but Nebraska is not one of them. The Nation's Report Card, as I said, was a website that reports the results from the NAPE, do report aggregate data and also subgroup data, rural versus urban, male versus female, racial, ethnic subgroups. And unlike our statewide assessment, the NAPE reports contextual data. So at the end of the cognitive portion of the test, the kids take a questionnaire for about 15 minutes, and they answer questions about their home, their classroom, and their experiences. I get this question all the time, and I think it's important that you know when NAPE is required and when it's not. The United States Department of Ed requires all states who receive Title I funding to participate in NAPE in reading and math every 2 years for 4th and 8th grade. So you can see the years at the bottom. It's required this year. That's why 300 schools in Nebraska are participating. And it will be for every odd number years for here on out. How is it enforced? Well, included in the Nebraska Department of Education district application for Title I funding is an assurance that any district applying for Title I fundings has to participate. So that's a pretty good incentive. And it's also the reason why we haven't had any districts refuse on odd number years. NAPE also has international studies, and I want to stress that these are optional. These are some of the studies. It's not even all of them. I'll let you read what each acronym stands for. Typically, during odd number years, we don't do a lot of international studies. So you'll see a lot of international studies come up next year. So what's my role? Well, I am a communicator. I help the schools know what they need to do to prepare for the NAPE, and I try to make this the best experience possible for the schools that are in the sample. I'm not always really very popular. The NAPE test isn't always very popular. But whether you agree with taking the NAPE or not, it's required this year. So I will make it the very best experience I can for you. I always get this question: why are some schools chosen more than others? Omaha and Lincoln are always in the sample. Why is that? Well, NAPE does not choose randomly. Most people think that it's a random selection, but it's not. It's a stratified random sampling. So the students that are in the sample are representative of Nebraska. This picture is a little tongue-in-cheek. It's not very representative of Nebraska, but so the students in the sample are proportionate in terms of free and reduced lunch, special education, gender, ELL status, race, ethnicity. So the larger schools tend to get picked more often because they have more of the subgroup that is needed. For example, our native schools are often chosen because they have larger populations of native students. And it would be difficult to go to individual schools that have lower populations. So what they tend to do is they choose schools with higher populations of certain subgroups. One thing you don't want to do, the achievement levels for our NDE NSCAS are on the left, and for the NAPE on the right. Do not compare. They are not the same. You know, developing is not proficient, but basic is grade level material. So when you think about proficient, you think about on track, but really the two do not correspond. They call NAPE achievement levels aspirational. In other words, their proficient is the aspired level at which the U.S. Department of Ed would hope all 4th and 8th graders will perform. How can you support NAPE? There's lots you can do. And I want to just thank you. I know some of you have supported me already. Where NAPE is concerned, be positive. You know, I've watched hundreds of kids' tests, and I've never seen a student become stressed during the test. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen occasionally, but I have not observed it. It's not high stakes. And I think it's an opportunity for kids to practice what they've learned for an hour. And that's not a bad thing to happen. So NAPE can be very positive, and it is my hope that you would put NAPE in a positive light. Do remind, principals are so busy, and school coordinators too, to complete the tasks required. I will CC you on every email that I send a school coordinator. And so you will know what is required of them when it is required. Most recently, principals needed to assign a school coordinator, and that was difficult for all of the 300 principals to get that task done. So I rely heavily on you to help me work with the principal to get that done. During even number years when NAPE is optional, I would really appreciate it if you would communicate to schools that participation is optional. It is in the preliminary letter that I send out, but as a NAPE coordinator, I'm really not going to stress that feature because, of course, they want all schools to participate. I believe in NAPE and I believe it does good things, but I know that there's other things that schools need to consider when they choose to participate or not. So I would really appreciate you reminding them that international studies are optional. And next year when NAPE tests come out, they will be optional. But during the odd number years, they are required. Grade 12 is another grade level. It is always optional. Results are not reported at the Nebraska level. They are reported for the United States. So I am very comfortable with you reminding superintendents and principals of this fact. The NAPE website, here is the NDE, the assessment landing page, the home page. And if you scroll down, Jeremy showed you this earlier, you can see 2 links that relate to NAPE. Here is the NAPE landing page. And some things that you might want to take a look at, or there's some, I won't pull them up now, but there's some snapshots that show how Nebraska does in relation to other states. And we do pretty well. But you need to remember that it's hard to compare apples and oranges. So, you know, schools in the southern part of our country face different challenges. And so we do really well. And there's a lot of reasons we do really well. We have solid teachers, but we also have a lot of students that come to school ready to learn and rich in language backgrounds. So this is my contact information. I would love to hear from you. Do not hesitate to call or email me. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. So this would be a great time for you to send in a chat if you have any questions. I'll wait for just a minute to see if any come in.
Question just came in. How are we notified if we're expected to give NAPE?
Okay, the notification letter will come out in late July or early August. And as I said, whenever I send an email, and it does happen electronically, whenever I send an email to the schools, the DACs are always CC'd. So you will get it just like they do. Sometimes when I just have an ongoing conversation with a coordinator, I may not CC you because I don't think it's relevant information. It would just kind of clog up your mailbox. So they'll get one in probably early August, and then they'll get another one in September, and about then that's when they need to take action and do something. And so then you'll see reminders go out. So far I think I've sent out, I don't know, 4 or 5 emails for various reasons.
Yeah, so we also have a question that says, never mind. Yeah, so if you haven't received emails already for this year, if you haven't been notified, you weren't selected for this year, right?
Right,
Terry?
That would be correct, yes.
Because she's heard back from all the districts that need to, correct?
True.
Okay, so if you didn't get selected, then that's the case for right now. Okay, Rhonda, I think you're ready.
All right, good morning. I'm Rhonda True, and I am the Enhanced Assessment Grant Coordinator for NDE. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the Skills Grant. That's the acronym, and you can see what it stands for up here. It's quite a mouthful. But this is the grant from the U.S. Department of Ed right now that I'm coordinating. So I'm the coordinator for that grant. So I want to tell you a little bit about it, how it impacts districts, and there's some tools there for districts as well that could be utilized. This is a little bit about skills. As you can see, it's one of 2 projects that were funded and announced back in December 2016. And it is a collaborative partnership between Nebraska, Wyoming, and Montana. There are 3 states, 4 organizations, and 10 expert panel members, and I'm going to show you those in a minute. And there is a 4-year timeline for the grant, so the grant will come to an end December of 2020. So here are the goals of the grant. As you know, this grant focuses all around science, and really specifically, we're looking at strengthening a knowledge base among stakeholders of how do we go about designing an assessment for science, And we're utilizing the principal design approach so that we can create and evaluate quality science assessments that will give us meaningful and useful scores. So that's one goal. And the other goal is just to establish a means for states to connect with the statewide assessment results with their local results so that we have a coherent system. And so those will be there are products coming out of the grant, and always our focus is looking at a coherent system for science. Here are the partners that are all involved. You can see Nebraska is the lead. And so you can see the other vendors that we're working with. EdCount is the primary vendor that is kind of our manager that's working through this with us, but we're working with ACS Ventures and SRI. And again, Montana, Wyoming are the other states involved, and PIRE's doing all the external evaluating pieces. I'm going to go through the project deliverables with you. This is what we already did in year one. There is a skills website, and I'll show you the link to that in a minute. And we have created some local and state evaluation tools, a theory of action, as well as 3 prioritized claims. Right now we're in year 2. We've worked on some pieces for large-scale assessment for science. Now we're moving into these classroom-based assessments and resources, and we will be involving some people possibly from your district in some of this work. So I'll show you that here in a little bit. I just want to give you a higher overview. In level 3, we will continue to work on the classroom-based assessment resources and come up with some task models, which will help us create tasks, which then will give us a set of student artifacts. And then in year 4 will be all about the reporting for the grant. One thing that I've really stressed is being the coordinator of the grant, I come from being a teacher and administrator in districts, is make sure we're talking about the process. And that's what this grant is about, not always about just the product, because you may be able to take the product, but you might have to tweak it to work for your district. But it's how do we go about doing this? How do classroom teachers develop classroom science, classroom tasks? So there's always usually a white paper or a process paper along with the deliverables or the product that we're putting out on our website. So the first thing that we started with on the grant, not only is the theory of action for the grant, each of the states came up with a theory of action for their science assessment system. And this we brought to our stakeholders, and stakeholders gave input into coming up with what do we want for outcomes for our kids for the science assessment system. And so you can read these here. These are the main ones stakeholders gave input into. We had visioning meetings as well to kind of come down to the bottom line of what's most important. And again, it's about, it needs to be something we can implement systematically and systemically. We need to make sure our educators get the professional learning that they need to support this. We want to make sure all of our kids are involved in 3-dimensional science learning and working towards those standards. We want to make sure our assessment system really contributes to our workforce, our kids coming out ready to be college and career ready for our Nebraska workforce as well. And then every student upon completion is, like I said, prepared for those experiences. So I want to go over some of the deliverables or products that have come out so far from the grant. Like I said, we're only in year 2. But the first one, we create a local and state self-evaluation protocols. And what the self-evaluation protocols for the local and the district or state do is noted up here. So really designed to focus on your assessments that you're using within the classroom, if you're looking at the district level or your class or local level, and really helps you guide your curriculum, provides information to teachers on the status of the progression through the key topics. And here's what it asks you to do. This protocol really asks you to kind of, it's a need, I call it a needs assessment. Like, okay, let's look at what we currently have in place. and identify all the assessments and planned assessments we want to give. And then what's the evidence? We need to evaluate the evidence that we have that these assessments are doing and providing us the information we need. And then you review the evidence across all assessments to see, are we giving something that's doubling or giving us the same information twice, or is it truly giving us the information we're expecting it to give us? These are the validity questions that you go through as you run through this protocol. And you actually have to score it and assign a value to those questions and then provide evidence around it. So it helps you come out with, oh, it's not my gut feeling says. It literally like gives it a value so you know where you are. So those are the 4 validity questions that you'll be gathering evidence around for each of those assessments. This year, we chose a couple districts to do the pilot study of this. Adams Central, outside Hastings, Nebraska, and Hemingford were 2 schools that took place in Nebraska with the pilot on the local needs assessment. Now, Wyoming and Montana also had multiple districts that participated, and you can see the steps that the districts went through when they were part of the pilot study. After the pilot study, they gave us really good feedback, and then we fine-tuned the local needs assessment tool, and it is now up on the skills website. So you can go and you can download it and utilize it for your district if you would like. One thing districts did tell us is, wow, for example, when they utilized their team to go through the protocol, the needs assessment protocol, they said some of us aren't as far along in assessment literacy as others. Who are talking terms, some of us don't know as well as others. So we now have provided and started to provide a digital workbook that can be used alongside of the protocol or just in sessions alone to increase your assessment literacy as well. So here's the purpose of the workbook. I'll let you read through those. See its purpose. Again, the educators really told us we need more background information, so that to the front here. Here's who the workbook would, the audience would be. Basically, your state and district administrators could be instructional leaders, content specialists. Both of those districts I talked to you about, they ran the protocol through with just science. So you could use it though for ELA, for math, but they just specifically did one content area. So those are people who could be involved. And here are the chapters. We are finished with chapter 1 and 2, and those are posted on the skills website. 1 is just an overview of all of it. And then chapter 2 starts breaking it down specifically into each validity area, validity question. So as you did the protocol, you could really just, the needs assessment protocol, the self-evaluation, you could watch the construct coherence video and then just do that portion of the needs assessment as you're working through it. But we've done construct coherence, and comparability should be coming up soon. And then the other 2 will be done by the end of, by March. So all 5 chapters will be there. Here's how to access the skills website. The local and state needs assessment are there. And we're up to chapter 3, I believe, right now that are posted. And then the other chapters, like I said, will be posted by March. If you just type in skills, and I know it's spelled oddly, but it's an acronym, but it's 2 L's and 2 S's at the end, it will take you right there. The other piece that I said that we're moving into this year, we're moving into the classroom-based assessment, professional learning. So we're going to have 2 days in June of this summer and involve elementary, middle school, and high school teachers from across the state. And the goal with the grant is we are going to have them look at some classroom science, classroom assessment tasks we have developed through the grant, and then we're going to have them give us feedback on that. But then we're also going to teach them a process utilizing evidence-centered design that they could replicate and develop their own classroom tasks based on their curriculum and the standards. So that is the goal for this summer. And here are the benefits, I think, to the grant, not only at the state level, but also at the local level that the grant is providing for not only our state, but also for our local districts. Are there questions? I went through that quickly. Mine is, the reason why I might reach out to talk to you is to involve some of your educators, which I have reached out several of your districts to get them involved, and there'll be more involvement as the grant goes on. But that's one of the main reasons you might hear from me. Are there any questions about the grant or anything I could answer for you? Thank you.
So we're clipping right along here. We'll have Terry Schuster talk to all of you about ELPA 21.
Hello, everyone. First, I just want to thank you for hanging in with us. It's been a little bit of a marathon, but we appreciate it. And even if you do not have any ELLs currently, I appreciate you listening, because you never know when one of our families may move to your district, and then you'll be calling me up in a panic. So this will just give you a nice little overview about this requirement. And as Jeremy said, I'm Terry Schuster. I'm the Title III Director. This assessment lives over in federal programs where I am. And that is about half of my job, is administering the English Language Proficiency Assessment for our state. The ELPA 21 stands for English Language Proficiency Assessment for the 21st Century, and it is a requirement for all ELLs to take on an annual basis, and that is under ESSA as well as State Rule 15. And some of you are really familiar with Rule 15, which I will just refer to a couple of times in this presentation, which lines out the provisions for serving ELs in our state. So the ELPA 21 is unique and different than other tests that you're familiar with, because the purpose is to measure students' progress in learning the English language over time. So, and that is the reason why the students are assessed every year in order to compare from year to year to see how they're doing. The English language proficiency is developed based on the English language proficiency standards, which is different than English language arts. And I always point that out, because this is basically about learning the English language, and that includes academic language skills that are aligned to the college and career ready practices. And the practices really are the academic language skills needed that ELs need to have in order to engage with content standards of English language arts, math, and science. So in the past, English language proficiency assessments may have been restricted to the forms of language, more grammar and sentence syntax type based. But with these new assessments like the ELPA 21, it does go a little bit deeper into the academic language necessary for students to engage with content areas. So that is a little bit different in our test. Our test is also, it's one test, but it is divided into 4 subtests. And they test each of the 4 language domains, which are listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Our test window is 6 weeks long, and if you're a veteran in giving the ELPA 21, then you know that time frame hasn't changed in the last 10 years. So it's administered in the spring. This year it is February 4th through March 15th. And again, a little difference with our summative test is that all English learners are required to be tested on the ELPA. And that includes students in grades K through 12, which is a difference from our content assessments. We do have a different testing vendor. That testing vendor is AIR, which is stands for the American Institutes for Research. So they have their own unique system, although as I listen to the presentations today, I can see how they have some commonalities across our vendors as DRC, NWEA, and ACT. You can access all the administration manuals and resources on the AIR portal, and I've included that link. And moving on then, on the AIR portal, that's your one-stop shop for all kinds of things. And if you click under resources, you will see the user guides and manuals. There's webinars and training modules. You can access translated test directions. Again, our test is different because we don't translate the test because our goal is learning English. However, there are translated test directions that you can use. You can also find the achievement level descriptors and a lot of important information your technology folks will want to know, which includes about the secure browser that we also have, any technical requirements and system requirements. And here's a screenshot of the homepage of the AIR portal. And as you can see on the left there, that's where you're going to click on one of those tabs on your role. And usually in the DAC, you are the test coordinator. On the portal, you're going to find some overall buckets of information that you're going to want to access for different reasons. And those are the TIDE. The TIDE is similar to these, I think what we called in NWA, the CAP, or the eDirect in DRC, and that's your student information system, and that you will use to make sure all your students are ready to go in testing, as well as you can designate users at different levels. You as the DAC should be entered into my system. If you're not, let me know and I will get you added. However, all the DACs from last year are in it, and as I get news of new DACs, I try to add them in. But it may be that you are missed, and so you'll let me know. And then we have the test delivery system, which is where the actual test administration takes place. We have the online record system, or reporting system rather, which is where you would go to retrieve your results. And then if you are administering a paper pencil form, the data entry interface is there because you will need to enter that information from the paper form. And there you can also get to our practice tests. One important thing I want to point out in bullet 1 is signing up for the email updates. You will have to sign up yourself for that. It's in the upper right corner. I'll show you that. And you can see that in the upper right corner. And there are the systems that you will, once you are in and have put in your password, you can access TIDE, the online reporting system, the DEI, and the test administration right there. A little bit about navigating the TIDE. As I said, most of the DACs have been entered. If not, let me know. Last Friday, we uploaded the information we had on kindergarten and first grade students, so they will be appearing soon in your TIDE for the summative assessment. The reason that we took their count early is because they have a paper pencil component that the other grades in 2 through 12 do not have, and we had to order some materials based on those numbers. So on January 9th, we will upload all your students' information in grades 2 through 12. So you have some time we wanted to make that after the Christmas break because many of you know our ELLs move around quite a bit over the holidays, and so there will be a little bit of time then to make sure that all your ELs are designated as ELs, or those that are no longer ELL are taken off your rosters before January 9th. You can also look at your settings for your designated supports as well as accommodations in TIDE, and you can also create appeals. So if for some reason there would be a technical difficulty or something weird that we all know happens, hopefully rarely, when you're administering the test, you can create an appeal that I will look at and see if can be approved, and perhaps the test reopened for some technical reason. The online reporting system is your shop to get your results. You can get individual student reports there, or you can get reports that are more all-encompassing of your district school level. Let's see, what did I want to tell you about that? A little bit about how the proficiency is determined. There are 3 overall levels that students will get an overall rating on, and that is they can be emerging, which are beginning levels, progressing, intermediate, and then finally proficient. And proficient is the score we go by to determine in our state that they are no longer ELL. In order to get proficient level, the students must score in each of the domains of listening, reading, speaking, and writing a level 4 or 5. They will be scored 1 through 5, with 4 and 5 being the highest in each one of those language domains. So this test is a little bit different than our legacy assessment, the ELDA, in that it is, excuse me, it's more of a conjunctive model of scoring, which means that students have to get a profile of 4s and 5s in all domains in order to reach proficient. Whereas our older assessment was more compensatory model, in which you might fall down in one of the domains, but you scored well in the others, and then that kind of compensated for that one lower score. That is not the way this assessment was designed. And also at the end, I'm going to include a link to where you can look more in depth about that scoring model and other technical information. This is just a screenshot of where you would go to retrieve your scores, and you can see that you can either get reports or your ISRs there. Another assessment that is in our ELBA 21 assessment system is called the ELBA 21 Dynamic Screener. This is an optional assessment and is used to identify ELs. It's not a summative assessment, and it is only designed to help you in that process that is in Section 3 of Rule 15 in the identification process that all districts do. So just a reminder for those of you that are new, you would give the home language survey. Everyone must do that. And if a question is answered that there is a language other than English in the home, then students would be required to take a screener to see if they are ELL or not. So the dynamic screener is an instrument that NDE is providing for districts to use for that purpose and meets the requirements of Section 3. A district does not have to use the ELBA 21 dynamic screener. You could be using your other ones that are like the IPT, the Woodcock-Munoz, or the LOS. Those screeners also meet Section 3 of the rule. But this one is at this point is of no cost to you. If you use the other ones, there is cost to you. It is administered similarly to the summative assessment, in that it's largely online unless you would need a paper pencil form for a student with disabilities. And the resources and manuals are available in the same place on the AIR portal that you use to get the summative materials from. On some of it, like in TIDE and on ORS, you'll just use a drop-down menu to designate whether you're retrieving information from the summative ELBA or the screener. There are a few differences that I want you to be aware of if you're using the ELBA 21 dynamic screener. And that is that the dynamic screener is not divided by sub-test domains. It is one test, and it's somewhat what we would call semi-adaptive in that there's a stopping point, whereas when a student has not answered enough questions correctly, it will not take you to the third part of the final step of the test. It will not advance. There is another difference in that the first speaking question set, which is the first set of questions on the actual test, Those questions are scored on the fly by the test administrator with a rubric that you can find on the portal. It's a very simple rubric, but the test administrator then enters in the student's score right off the bat. And so I want you to be aware of that additional difference. One other question that I get a lot about the screener is the folks use it and they say, this is great because I want to see how my progress is going with my students. Can I use this as a formative assessment? And the answer is no. It was designed for the purpose of identifying English learners only. And additionally, there's a cost associated to the state for the test. So we will only allow it being used once per student. And finally, there's my information there. The first one is if you have technical questions about, I can't get this screen to come up or whatever, that is the AIR help desk, and they can help you. I can't help you with those kinds of questions, and there's their number and or email. Otherwise, another resource is the Title III website and ELPA 21 technical reports and scoring interpretation guides can be found there. Just look under the assessment tab and you will see ELPA 21 pop up there, and there's information for you. And then if you have a policy question, of course, or a question about accessibility or something of that nature, then feel free to give me a call or email me. So I will take any questions that you might have about the ELPA 21. And again, thanks for hanging in there. I appreciate it.
Okay, once again, if you have questions, you can post those questions to the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask those questions.
Oh, wow.
I'm not seeing anything popping up, Terry.
That's the first.
I think obviously it's nice that we got done early. I appreciate that. Hopefully you do too. I want to just talk about one or two other things here real quick. If you have other questions, any types of questions that you'd like to ask us, we would take those at this time. But I did want to talk to you about educators and something that not everybody knows, but how much we involve educators in the work that we do. Every summer we bring in educators to write items in ELA, math, and in science for alternate and general. Those custom tests are very much a product of Nebraska educators. So Nebraska educators either write or review every single item that goes on our test. We also have bring in teachers to do alignment work, to do standards work, to do cut score recommendation work. We use teachers a lot, and we try to involve them whenever possible because we believe that's very important. It's a touchstone for us to make sure that we're doing a good job. And what I would ask for you is that later this year we're gonna send information about where teachers can apply to be on those groups, in those groups, involved in this process. When they do summer work, they can get paid for doing that work. It's not a great paycheck, but it's better than no paycheck. What I would say is it's also a way that you get to have your district have a voice in the process. And so recommending that your best teachers, your exceptional teachers, participate in that is a great way for them to be involved and for your district to have a voice. So later in the year, we'll send out information about how they can apply to be involved in those different activities. And we encourage you to share that with teachers. And we encourage you to share it with any diverse teacher groups that you have, and to make sure that you share it with your best teachers so that they can have a good say in the work that we continue to do. So any other questions that we can answer for you? So we are going to share, I'm going to have Tyrena share the PowerPoints with all of the new DACs, as well as I think I have 5 questions here that I'd like you to respond to and give us feedback about today. So we'll share that with you, and then we'll post them as well as the recording. So we'll make sure those all get out to you as well. Any other questions? Okay, I'm sure that lunchrooms are chaotic places about this time, and so you're probably having to go do other duties. Give you some time back in your schedule today. As always, if you have any questions at all, please let us know by email or by phone call, and we would be happy to respond. I'll stay on for another couple minutes if you have anything else. That would be great. Otherwise, feel free to drop off, and thank you. Enjoy. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We're going to be ending the meeting now. Statewide Assessment, this is Jeremy. How may I help you? Student reports? Yep.